Welcome back, my beautiful friends. You're listening to A Moment of Zen right here on 710 WOR, the voice of New York, iHeartRadio. I'm your host, Zen Sams. Coming up in just a few moments in our Hello Open Metaverse, brought to you by Animoca Brands, we're featuring the awesome Mohamed Ezeldin. Mo heads up the tokenomics team at Animoca Brands, a leader in digital entertainment, blockchain, and gamification that's working to advance digital property rights and contribute to the establishment of the open metaverse. Today, he's joined by his good friend, Amanda Slavin, co-founder of Catalyst Creative and author of The Seventh Level. She's been recognized as Forbes 30 Under 30 for marketing and advertising. Today, she's joined by Anthony Day, whose career spans over 20 years in tech and innovation with the likes of Monitor, Deloitte, IBM, and Polkadot. He's also the host of the Blockchain Won't Save the World podcast, bringing hype-free, objective analysis into the history and trajectory of blockchain and Web3. Today, we're chatting all about education surrounding Web 3.0, the basics to keep in mind using the blockchain, and its most important use cases. Welcome to the show, my friends.
Thank you so much for the kind invitation. Great to be back.
Thank you so much for joining us today. Mo, I'll start with you. I see when you look at the broader picture here, I kind of feel and see you and Animoca as accelerators of sorts. Put simply, an accelerator is an organization that helps existing companies grow and develop. Their team typically often includes experts from a variety of backgrounds. And when you talk about it in a Web3 context, this often includes those with a deep understanding of tokenomics, metaverse, and how best to match a project's idea to the needs of the ever-changing Web3 market. And above all, Mo, project heads like yourself need tons of mental fortitude, coachability, and execution-focused mindset. Why is education a top priority at Animoca Brands, and what fundamentals are you aiming to teach?
I guess education is at the forefront of everything, like the foundation of everything that we do. And for us to be able to move forward as an industry, we need to have a solid foundation for that. So with that in mind, we talk about different buzzwords within the space as low-hanging fruit. They have different meanings to different people, even within our own industry and within our own enterprise and portfolios from that aspect. So education from that side of things is super important so we can move forward as one. And also we talk about mainstream adoption. We want mass adoption to come in. We want users to come in. If we can't agree on what some of these terms mean, how can we then expect people outside looking in to agree that actually this is a good space? So that's one side of things. The other side of things, education in a more historical sense. We've seen that we've been held back, especially that the rise in technology in the past 20 years, as human beings, we're only starting to see the knock-on effects of how our interaction with technology and what we're being taught in schools and universities. There is a big disparity between both. So the rise of blockchain technology can actually help close that massive gap that's there, but it's on industry leaders like ourselves to help fortify that space.
Exactly. And knowing this, we can trust that data is extremely important, because that's the bottom line here. This is why I think blockchain especially is so important, and educating the community, to your point, especially the next generation, is going to be the cornerstone for all of us, because education continues to be a major touch point in the Web3 space, with many brands and initiatives focusing on educating users alongside the technological development. So what you're doing is great. Anthony, welcome back.
Thank you so much, Zen. It's great to be back.
Absolutely. So let's dive right in here. So Web3 will also make use of machine learning and artificial intelligence. And this is, of course, going to help empower more intelligent trends and adaptive applications. But really, Web3 embraces decentralization. We've been talking about this from the onset, and it's being built, operated, and owned by its actual users, which is quite proprietary here versus Web 2. But when you look at Web 3, it also uses, of course, blockchain and cryptocurrencies and NFTs to give power back to the users in the form of ownership, of course, in this next stage of innovation with this internet and where we're heading. Talk to me about how Web 3 specifically can scale one's business if you're looking at it from a business perspective.
Yeah, that's a really interesting question, Zen. So with scalability and Web3, you talk about public blockchains, you talk about open standards, open source code. There's a whole bunch of reasons why that's important. Open source allows anybody to interpret the code that you're using to be able to build on top of that code or to fork that code and create different things. So open and transparent makes things very easy to build on top of. So rather than creating or trying to re-engineer things that existed before, you can build and kind of progress from work that's already been done. So we're allowed to move faster. I think that's a really important part. Also, when you have open economies, token economies, open data platforms, and so on, anyone can participate. Anyone can host a node. Anyone can contribute a transaction. And so building a community becomes much easier to do because there are no barriers to entry, or the barriers to entry at least are lower and easier. And also at the same time with the, I would say, gig economy, also the open source economy, it's easier for individuals, founders, small projects to start contributing code or contributing to Web3 in general. So the barriers, it doesn't have to be a 9-to-5. You don't have to join a large enterprise to be part of this industry. You can be a sole developer, you can be a small team, you can be a giant team if you like. But the barriers for contributing code or contributing to this community or this economy is much, much lower than some other areas.
I love it. It's truly the rise of the creator economy. It's very well put. Amanda, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
So let's get your perspective here. So in Web 3.0, of course, we know blockchain will exercise this peer-to-peer technology principles, P2P, what we call. Web 3 is decentralized. And of course, instead of large swaths of the internet, to Anthony's point, controlled and owned by centralized entities, ownership gets distributed amongst its builders and users. This is core. It often requires enormous amounts of energy to operate a blockchain. And this has been one of the most justifiably, of course, significant hurdles to the technology's widespread adoption. But we're increasingly seeing Web3 companies really emphasize eco-awareness in their business models. Talk to me, in your point of view, what will be the top blockchain trends for 2023? And what do you say to the carbon footprint these transactions are leaving behind?
Well, this wasn't in the bio, but I'm a teacher. I have a master's in education, and my background is actually focused on engagement. And I applied these levels of engagement, these 7 levels of engagement, into everything that I've done throughout my entire career. And when it comes to Web3, there's this huge opportunity around being able to really reach these higher levels of engagement, the level 6 and the level 7. 6, inspiring people to set goals to make a difference, and 7th level, literate thinking when personal values and beliefs align. But with the carbon footprint problem, it's standing in the way of being able to have these larger initiatives take place and for individuals to be able to see the really positive impacts when it comes to the blockchain. So I think what Mo was saying before is that there are huge barriers. Forget about just the carbon footprint, which is a huge barrier. The biggest barrier, I think, is the limitations in the way that we're communicating about Web3 and about the blockchain, about the technological implications of these initiatives, because people have no idea what we're talking about. And so we have to stop using acronyms. We have to stop describing things with the technology. So an NFT is actually describing what it is, not actually, and what it does, not giving it a name that is easy to understand, easy to digest. So if we're going to do anything when it comes to Web3, I think we're going to stop talking about it as Web3. It's going to become an invisible layer as a part of everything that we're doing. And it's going to be starting to be embodied by the people that don't understand it in a way that's streamlined and then communicated in that fashion so that the actual public can start to adopt it versus just still a small subset of people.
That's so well said. So well said. Well, of course you're a teacher, and there you have it. Thanks for that, Amanda. That was a great recap. Mo, I'll come back to you on this one. When you look at the grand scheme of things, all new human inventions in our civilization tend to follow one basic rule. The innovations that increase convenience will eventually become king. We've seen this with cars versus horses, with credit cards versus cash, and computers versus paper record. How will Web3 facilitate things? How is this more convenient for the user? When you ask this from the broader perspective, why can't we do this using existing non-blockchain, non-metaverse systems? And will this save money? I know you have a lot to unpack, but you're really good at what you do.
So it helps being a teacher or having been a teacher in a previous life as well. So I think that the main difference is that Web3 isn't for convenience. It's more for digital ownership. And there has to be a shift in mentality because we understand physical ownership. I own my house, I own my car, I own my phone, but we don't really understand the value of owning our digital assets or even our data to begin with. Whenever I'm on stage, I always ask the question, how many of us heard about Facebook buying out WhatsApp a few years back, a lot of hands go up. How many of us were downloading Signal and Telegram because we were afraid of our data? A lot of hands go up. How many of us still use WhatsApp? Everyone's hand still goes up. So it shows that we understand, or we think we understand the problem, but clearly we don't, because we're still using platforms where we know our data isn't safe. And that's one layer of it. So for me, it's not as much about how it can make things more convenient, but how it can give us back ownership, where it is genuine an ownership economy of our data, of our digital assets. And then to your point, NFTs was an NFT, it was a PFP, it might be an in-game asset, but we're starting to see so many different variations and use cases for how we can use NFTs. And for anyone out there listening, again, it's like, well, that doesn't actually answer the question. Think of an NFT as a digital container, and you can put anything inside that you want. And another big part of why we've seen limitations to adoption of the technology is the technology is still very nascent, considering what 12 or 13 years ago we had Bitcoin, and fast forward until today, you've got a lot of big brands who are now dipping their toes. If it's Nike, if it's Adidas, if it's Ubisoft, if it's a lot of the big central banks. So we're starting to see adoption take place, but there are still limitations in terms of what's happening on the back end and how we're portraying that to the front end. And that's where there's a big difference between crypto and Web3, but I'll pause there.
I love it. I love it. Okay, well, we have 2 minutes left. I want to get Anthony's question, then I'll come back to Amanda. But Anthony, ultimately, what we ask is that people look beyond what we've been saying now, these buzzwords, right? Amanda brought up a great point, these buzzwords, and consider what will drive mass adoption based on convenience and present day value. If you look at the demographics, right, we have Gen Z, they want NFT based loyalty. So planning for that will help to endear businesses to the next generation. And while Decentraland may, by some estimates, have less than 1,000 daily active users, okay, how many kids these days are logging into the Roblox servers to play and collaborate on virtual world creations? Hint, it's in the millions. So thinking broader, blockchain will eventually, to everyone's point here, change everything. And it is something that we must explore and address on a more visionary roadmap. But all the implementations must be framed not in terms of what the current hype is, in my opinion, but in terms of the fundamentals of how this can disrupt technocracy and really put power back to the people. It's all about data sovereignty. Anthony, what is the necessary catalyst, in your opinion, to start the next crypto bull market? And is mass adoption truly in the horizon?
So I don't think of it in terms of crypto and market caps as such. Coin prices, or the coin prices for respective layer 1s and 2s, are analogous to high growth tech stocks. That's the appreciation or the valuation of how much activity or how much potential sits in those particular platforms. If you look at the developer activity on particular platforms, that's super important. If you look at the number of applications being built on those platforms, it's super important. Blockchain itself is not going to save the world, right? I've said that before. It's about people using technology to transform the way they do things, to change the jobs that they're already doing, or to create businesses that may be better, do more, do better, do different. How do we do that? We put the technology into the hands of more people. We help more people understand the implications of decentralized technology and how it can work in a language they understand. And we give them, in my view, the next big horizon is low code or no code tooling that allows non-Web3 core developers to be able to work with decentralized technology, so that an enterprise developer, a startup developer, a student doesn't have to necessarily learn Solidity or Rust. They can imagine an application that makes use of a decentralized community, or that makes the use of tokens, or makes use of its own cryptographic economy, and is then able to do whatever that is in verticals like gaming or finance or social media or any other space. I think accessibility of the technology is going to be critically important. And then it's about the people doing things with it.
Love it. Well, thank you so much for that very elaborate, answer to my question. It's exactly where I was going with it, because I wanted you to say it, right? It's in the sense where now we're listening to all the education come around for the technology surrounding Web3 and blockchain, but you are an expert in your field. You know, Mo does what he does because he's the head of tokenomics at Animoca, and Amanda is the business person she is because she studies this, and this is your world. But from an outsider's perspective, who's just looking at this unfold, it's refreshing to know that we do have leaders in the society like yourselves who are the pillars of the education. So thank you.
Much appreciated. Again, like Amanda said, we have so often mistitled or incorrectly addressed the community. We've so often gone out with explaining how blockchains and cryptocurrencies or cryptography works rather than the implications of what they do. And the engineers rightly title things in the same way as the explorers named towns, mountains, and islands after themselves. The engineers who created incredible technology came out with terminology that at the time they wanted to use to describe the stuff we have. That hasn't been easy for regular human beings to follow on and pick up. So we've got some work to do.
Well, listen, we are out of time, my dear friends. Don't move a muscle. We'll be right back after this. And I just want to thank all of you for coming on and chatting blockchain education and where we're headed. Thank you. Well, that's a wrap, my dear friends. That was our Hello Open Metaverse segment brought to you by Animoca Brands. Do check out Anthony Day on LinkedIn at Anthony JJ Day. Check out Amanda Slavin, co-founder at Catalyst Creative and author of The Seventh Level. And definitely check out Mohamed Ezeldin, head of tokenomics at animocabrands.com. You're listening to A Moment of Zen right here on 710 WOR, the voice of New York, iHeartRadio. We'll be right back after this.
A Moment of Zen is brought to you by Animoca Brands. As a worldwide industry leader in digital entertainment, blockchain, and digital property rights, Animoca Brands plays a key role in the future growth of the open metaverse. During unstable times like these in burgeoning industries similar to blockchain, it's important to realize that blockchain can and will survive and eventually flourish, and industry-leading companies like Animoca Brands will guide the transformation into the future. Animoca Brands will keep building a better and fairer Web3 ecosystem, create impact for better, and bring true digital property rights to all internet users through NFTs and the open metaverse. For more information and to become part of the excitement, go to animocabrands.com. That's animocabrands.com.
Welcome back, my dear friends. You're listening to A Moment of Zen right here on 710 WOR, the voice of New York, iHeartRadio. Welcoming back to our Hello Open Metaverse segment brought to you by Animoca Brands. We're chatting with the amazing Amanda Slavin, co-founder at Catalyst Creative and author of The Seventh Level, Mohamed Ezeldin, head of tokenomics at Animoca Brands, and Anthony Day, blockchain expert and a podcast host. Welcome back to the show, my friends.
Thanks. Thank you.
All right.
Excited
to have you on. Okay, so let's chat. We've been talking about blockchain technology, where we're headed, the education involving this industry. Let's chat mindset. Okay, so a new survey from CoinWire, which surveyed over 10,000 investors in the crypto space back in December of 2022, found that user sentiment towards the metaverse has digital reality poised to influence all areas of social life. We have 69% of respondents that have placed their bet on the metaverse to reshape social lifestyle with this new approach to entertainment. We have 65% they believe in metaverse's new approach to social activities. So sentiments on how it will affect finances, business, and education are also extremely high at close to 62%. These numbers speak volumes because over the last 5 years, if you look, Microsoft secured 158 metaverse-related patents, which overshadowed big tech firms such as Meta and Tencent and Epic Games. What do you say to all of this motion, and what does this really signal in our industry?
I think that teachers were not a part of that survey. That would be my first thing. I think that we have, New York City Department of Education, this is not technically Web3, but it is a new innovative technology, banned ChatGPT from schools. And that was a really big uproar in the technological community because people didn't understand it. They said, New York City Department of Education said that it doesn't teach critical thinking. I'm going to go back to that whole concept around that NFT is a non-fungible token. It's describing the technological implications of it. ChatGPT is a tool. It should not be actually teaching critical thinking. We're too obsessed with the outcome and the assessments of how we are thinking about critical thinking versus actually changing the way that we're teaching critical thinking. So in order for the metaverse to have true adoption in education systems, we need to work with educators. We need to ask educators how, same thing what Anthony said. First of all, we need to change the language so that it's inviting to educators and say, this is what it means for you. This is what it looks like for you. This is how it could support you. This is how it could guide you. Then we have to teach them those skills to make their lives easier, not harder. They already have so much that they're working against in our education system. And so we can't just say, here's a new flashy thing over here that's going to completely make your life harder because there's no adoption within the classroom, or here's a new flashy thing over here that's going to take away from your the work that you're doing. It has to be integrative. And so I do feel that the metaverse, blockchain, interoperability in terms of the classroom and digital learning. And just imagine how groundbreaking that's going to be. The metaverse and reality, and children being able to have that tie, that connection. There's so many opportunities, but before we keep talking to teachers, we have to ask teachers and listen, and then work with them to create the new realities. Like Mo, that's Mo and I connected because we were both educators. Now we're in this space, and education is everywhere, and we have to understand that, and we have to then again really listen before we keep talking.
I love it, because once you're educated, then you don't fear the unknown, because you're completely aware of the steps involved in this entire ecosystem when we're talking about Web3. So total understanding the trajectory of what these terminologies mean, applying them to your business, applying them to your own individual lifestyle as we're headed into this next the next phase of the internet is extremely important. You said it, you hit it right on. All right, so now we have a group question. I want to kind of do a discussion here. So if you guys want to answer the question, we'll go back to Anthony first, we'll go to Mo, and then Amanda, you can answer lastly. So in line with the uncertainty that many investors are feeling, back to statistics, because statistics don't lie, more than 60% said they want more regulations applied to the industry. Of course, we all do. That's part of the problem. And over the last year, regulators across the globe began to adopt and discuss new rules for the industry. Nonetheless, areas of Web3 like the Metaverse remain high on the priority list for many countries. Recently, we have South Korean government. They opened up its pilot Metaverse city to the public. And a report from McKinsey forecasted that the Metaverse will generate $5 trillion in value in the next 7 years. 5 trillion. That's a big number. Anthony, we'll start with you. What are your thoughts on this? Is it overhyped? Get in while you can. Start to educate yourself. What does this all mean?
So if you look at the metaverse, I think there's a huge amount of potential for this being another domain or another horizon of activity, whether that be economic activity, education, as Amanda said, whether that be B2B, B2C. I think a lot of people's current impressions, for right or wrong, of the metaverse is we go into a virtual space, we walk around with an avatar, we maybe are able to jump, but for the most of the part, that's about all we're able to do. And then we crowd around something that's represented in 3D. And that's very limited, right? It's quite difficult to get excited about that. Like you described about Sandbox or Decentraland earlier, the applications that exist in these spaces right now are not that much more sophisticated than either video games or basic video games without the fun part, or virtual concerts, which are not offering that much more if I'm viewing it through the eyes of an avatar. You also have B2B, right? Significant space, the opportunity for businesses, teams to co-create in a virtual space. Now, from an enterprise perspective, that could be two private organizations. From a more Web3 centric perspective, that can be about developers working together in a virtual space to create a new product or to create an application or to create a space in which an intrinsically motivated community can come and create value. And that value can be shared with a token. And so together you're creating a collaborative community. The creator economy, gone wild, augmented through 3D. So the B2B side of the metaverse, or the industrial metaverse, I think is underrepresented or underconsidered at the moment. And so the business value in that 5 trillion divided by 7 years, right? So if it's 1 trillion a year, however you cut it, a lot of that value, I believe, is going to be automation of existing inefficient activity, right? Removal of flights, quicker time for developers to work on stuff together. The example I often use is car designers working virtually on a vehicle. Right? They used virtual reality headsets. They're able to work in a shared space. They're able to make edits live. They're able to make changes, view things from different angles, change colors, materials, sounds, etc. And that's a collaboration space. Whether you consider that to be an enterprise application or a metaverse application, because it's closed versus open, I think is a worthwhile debate. I think we've also got to make sure we're not just thinking about these as corporate video games. Right? To me, the metaverse has to be more than just going in with an avatar, running around a space, achieving some objectives, collecting some coins or whatever else it is, and leaving, because that to me doesn't really move the needle significantly. So a few different considerations there, but I think it's important for people just to be taking that as a baseline before we move on and get too excited.
Love it. Mo, what are your thoughts on this? Overhyped, get in while you can, start to educate yourself?
I think for me, the concept of a metaverse personally is it's not just online, it's in real life as well. And it's a fusion of both. What we saw over COVID is we miss human interaction. We need real life human interaction. So this concept of, like we saw in Ready Player One, where everyone's plugged into a headset and that is life. I hope that's not what the metaverse is. To Anthony's point as well, are we just going to be running around and huddling, watching experiences online, or do we still need the IRL aspect of that? So for me, it's a fusion of both. In terms of what that gives us and hype and FOMO, so fear of missing out, the reason we see that within the space is down to this idea of rewards and incentives. If you come in and buy something, you get rewarded. And in real life, you don't get rewarded. You're not paid for going to the gym to exercise. You're not paid for playing your computer game. You might be from the top 2% if on the esports layer, or you're an Olympian or an athlete of the highest order. But in general, you're not paid for these basic things. So there needs to be a mindset shift to what motivates people to come into an ecosystem. To the point Anthony was making earlier, is that we're actually going to see new business use cases born out of fungible tokens, of non-fungible tokens, or digital assets, and we're still scratching at the surface of what that looks like as of now.
I love it. And Amanda, you are an educator yourself. This is your space. You live and you breathe this. I know from my perspective, I'm always saying we need more regulation. I mean, regulation is, I think, key. Mass adoption is key, and education is key. So regulation, mass adoption, education, those are my three sticking points. What are your thoughts? Is this overhyped? Are you telling people get in while you can, separate of the educating yourself? What's your advice?
So I was an educator, then I had an agency for 10 years and applied what I learned from education with brands. And I always said brands are the best teachers in the world. They just need the right curriculum, because they have this huge classroom of learners. And I believe that learning is not confined within the four walls of a classroom. And so I think the future of the metaverse is, which I actually also hate this word, this phygital word. I really want to rebrand that, but this physical and digital. And I am obsessed with interoperability, because I believe that the future of the metaverse is an integrative approach to understanding a person wherever they are within their life of a learner. So whether that is in a metaverse environment or within a classroom, if we could start to have shared language and shared semantics, shared meaning of those behaviors, of what it means to learn in the metaverse, of what it means to learn in the classroom, I'm hoping the metaverse will change the way that we're thinking about the physical space. And to, what we just talked about in terms of rewards and this pay to play and this pay to earn and the earn to learn, that stuff doesn't work, because it doesn't work in the real world either. It's a lower level of engagement, and extrinsic motivators are never going to incentivize creativity, or never going to incentivize creative thinking. It's going to get someone to a means to an end, but then we have to do more, and we have to do more in the physical world too. So I'm never under the situation of like FOMO. I try very hard to not do that. So I would say, take your time. This is the beginning. This is like when the internet had a modem and we all remember that AOL sound and the CDs in the mail. Our kids are going to be having a completely new perspective and way of thinking about the entire world. So just take your time, learn, and then approach it in the way that you feel is best for you. And just keep learning. Just keep learning and learning and learning, whether it's in the metaverse or in the physical space. And don't do it to just earn, coins to then buy a Gucci hat in Gucciverse or wherever.
I love it. Well, guys, thank you so much. I love these perspectives, all unique, all valid, all very, very educated. You guys are awesome. Anthony, Amanda, Mo, thank you for coming on today. It was a pleasure chatting.
Thank you so much, Zen. Have a great rest of your day.
That was our Hello Open Metaverse segment, brought to you by Animoca Brands. Do check out Anthony Day on LinkedIn at Anthony JJ Day. Check out Amanda Slavin, co-founder at Catalyst Creative and author of The Seventh Level. And definitely check out Mohamed Ezeldin, head of tokenomics at animocabrands.com. You're listening to A Moment of Zen right here on 710 WOR, the voice of New York, iHeartRadio. We'll be right back after this.